Aki, amazing to see you, my man, and amazing that you've taken this time to come and share your testimony. And I don't know anything about it, so I'm desperate to hear what this story is about and what the Lord has been doing in your life. But before we start, please introduce yourself, name, and who you are, and just your background, so people, the viewers can understand what you're about.
Thank you, my brother Darlington. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to share my testimony. I'm very excited because I've been led, I believe, by God, and I've also had confirmation from a few brothers and sisters in Christ, who encouraged me to also share my testimony. Until now, it's been for like an audience of one, pretty much. Although yes, it's still an audience of one, but only God knows who else it could reach. And if it's just one person, it would be really a blessing because
Amen.
angels in heaven rejoice when one sinner turns to repentance. So my name is Aki. I am based in the UK. However, I wasn't actually born here. I was born in Nigeria.
Oh.
Uh, yeah, I don't know if I should. Well, is it 3 decades ago? But I'm not yet 30.
Okay.
If that makes
Not yet
sense.
there.
Yeah, not quite there. Very close though. I'm getting closer to it, but not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, I was born in Nigeria, to Nigerian parents, both of them Yoruba tribe particularly. And yeah, so we came here when I was about 8 years old, which is almost 20 years ago now for me. That's
Uh,
probably been at my age. Not quite 20 years yet, but it'll be 20 years next year. So yeah, so praise God for his grace. So I've pretty much lived here longer than I've lived in Nigeria.
uh,
Uh, I spent most of my, later childhood and teenage years here. And I haven't actually been back to Nigeria since I came here as well.
oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, my parents have, but I haven't. Neither have my brothers. I have two siblings, two brothers. The youngest one was born here. He's never been to Nigeria. But the one just immediately younger than me, he was born in Nigeria but came here when he was 3. So there's a 5-year age gap between me and him, and a 9-year age gap between me and the youngest one. So there's quite a big of a
Wow.
the space or gap between each of us. Yeah, so we've been here. So it's a fairly like middle normal sized family, really. But yeah, my journey has been intense. It's been one full of trials, testing, tribulation, um, faith, doubt, fear, everything you can name it, you know what I'm saying? And I think just as Paul would say, he was the chief of sinners. I would consider myself also one of the chief of sinners, which is interesting. Even though I grew up in the Christian faith, I had, the background, my parents would say they're the believers. And yeah, so I've had that background of the faith. So I wasn't completely ignorant to God or to Christ, you know what I'm saying? I've been fairly familiar with it. But before I even go deeper in that, maybe I would just start with just saying where God has brought me to and what He saved me from, and then I'll take you back to how it all unraveled and we got to
Okay.
that place.
Well,
Yeah.
before we even start there, because you said obviously you was born in Nigeria, yeah. Do you have any recollection of how you were and or how it was like when you were? I don't know what state was. What state were you born in?
Lagos,
In Lagos.
Lagos.
Okay, so right in the city. Okay, so how do you have any recollection of what it was like then when you were like, young, or that's all wiped out of your memory now?
I'm not that old yet.
There's things I struggle to remember about last year, so I'm not judging here.
I hear you. I hear you. You're right. Yeah. So I do have some recollections. Of course, the older I get, the more it does fade away. I think there's a few, key memories that I do remember because there were, significant events in my life. Um, from, I grew up in Lagos. We lived in actually a flat in Nigeria, which was passed down from my dad's dad. So my
Okay.
dad grew up with a family of 7 children. He is the sixth out of the seven, and all same parents. Whilst my mom grew up with a family of 4 children. Well, 4 children from the same parents, and then one other from the same father but different mother. Right, and so they had big families. But anyways, the house we lived in Nigeria was passed down from my dad's dad, so my granddad. So it was his house, which my dad then occupied and took over, and we lived there whilst we were in Nigeria. My parents did quite well, financially and work-wise, my dad was doing IT in a company called Siemens. They're probably not as popular now, maybe as they were back then and stuff like that. But my mom, she's been a school teacher pretty much since, and even till now, although
Hmm.
in a nursery field now. And
Wow.
yeah, so they did quite well in Nigeria. You could say drove good cars and things like that. Um, though, the house we lived in wasn't like the biggest like some other people maybe back in Africa may live in. So I had a fairly, average, you could say, well, in Nigeria context, maybe a bit more above average
Okay.
upbringing. If we're looking at the material side of things, yeah.
Did
And
you have siblings?
yeah. So my middle brother, he was born in Nigeria. So it was me for 5 years by myself.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, so I was the only child for about 5 years, which was interesting because in that time I developed a lot of independence because naturally I have that, tendency to be quite independent, to want to do things on my own, to get on with things on my own, which
Mm.
interesting later on in life is something God is actually trying to, help me to, learn to also be more dependent on him, so
Yes.
interdependence. Yeah, so then I had a younger brother come in, when I was about 5 and stuff like that. We're very different, temperamentally, I guess, or even personality wise. We have a lot of similarities. We're quite gentle, we're quite calm, but I think I can be a bit more bold than he is, you know what I'm saying? And yeah, so we had a bit of that. He had actually an interesting incident when we're still in Nigeria, which he, almost drowned in water, but by the grace of God, he's still alive today, which
Wow.
is part of his testimony. So when it's his time to share, he can share that. But so yeah, we had quite a lot of things going in Nigeria, quite eventful, So I didn't because I was only still young. I left when I was about 8. You could say I didn't really experience the worst of Nigeria
Right.
sense. But I did have a little taste of, the good stuff in Nigeria as well. Because I went to my first school was I think a public but Christian school.
Okay.
Um, it was there's a popular church in Nigeria which is very well known. They're over here as well. It's one of the biggest churches in the world actually. The overseer is very popular. I don't know if I should name the church or not, but not that I have anything against them, but yeah. So they had a school in Nigeria which I attended, but then I left and then I went to a private school. Was it private school? Yeah, private school in Nigeria before coming over here. So I had if you look at the material sense in itself, I had a fairly decent
Yeah, it
upbringing.
sounded like your life was like quite stable in that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so what was the reason why you guys left Nigeria then?
Okay, so it was mainly my dad's idea for us to come over here. And when I've spoken to him since then, obviously since growing up, he's explained to me that one of his considerations was mainly because of my brother, my middle brother, who was just born at the time. You know how I mentioned we're quite different personality wise and temperament, right? So my dad thought, okay, I could probably survive in the Nigeria environment because it can be quite tough, it can be quite rigorous, it could be yeah, quite challenging and stuff like that. So he thought I had that personality or that drive, you could say, to survive in such a harsh environment. Whereas my brother, the middle one, he wouldn't have that such. He would have found it difficult. You know what I'm saying to you could say survive. That's at least according to my dad. So that was one of the reasons that drove him to bring us here. On top of the fact also he was, I guess seeking, maybe a better life for himself and for the family. Well, as you could say a lot of Africans probably do see the West as like, is that place where you want to get away from Africa, start afresh, and live a so-called better life, right? And so yeah, so he came here first actually, which was his plan. So his plan was to come here first, find his feet, and then eventually we'll come and join him. So he was here for about 6 months. And as far as I remember back then, or how they've retold the story to me, is like my mom was a bit impatient because he was gone. My dad was gone for like about 6 months now, and we're thinking, okay, what's going on? When are we going to come and join? So eventually, we came to join him, even though he wasn't yet completely settled. So we ended up actually staying apart for some months actually.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, he was living with a family friend of his who he came to meet when he first came here, and we lived with my mom's sibling, so my mom's brother and his
Oh,
wife. Yeah, yeah, and their family who were here already as well.
In what area was that? What area were you in?
Um, so actually, no, sorry, before we actually joined my mama's brother and sister, we joined another family friend. So they were in Essex in a place called Rochford, it's near Southend. Right, yeah. So this was around 2006. And yeah, so we lived around there with them. They had a daughter who was about my age and a son who was my brother's age as well. So we lived with them for a few months before we moved to the town where we're now in.
Right.
Um, yeah, which is where we first lived with my mom's sibling, my mom's brother and sister, and brother and his wife, sorry, and their family, which is Dartford. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So how was that like then? Obviously, living separately from your dad and all that. When you were here in England, how was that for you then?
Do you know what? It's interesting. So I'll to answer that question, I'll go back to Nigeria a little bit, because just to describe the relationship I had with my dad. I think as any son would, I saw my dad as like a hero, yeah, someone who I wanted to be like. You could say someone who I idolized, right? And yeah, I really had a love for my dad, but at the same time, he was quite harsh and strict in discipline, right? And of course, over time, I started to grow some resentment to him as well because I felt like, man, you know my true parents wouldn't treat me the way, he did. And of course, I've grown now to learn and to have grace for him and to forgive him. But at that time, it's like, man, this is really tough, man. I'm not sure if these are really my parents, the way I'll get treated. So I got in trouble a lot as well in school. Of course, I was quite rebellious. I had that, kind of attitude as well.
And that's
Um,
that's here in England, is it?
you could say it began in Nigeria and
Okay.
continued, here as well. So in that time gap when I didn't have my dad in Nigeria, because he was here first whilst we were still in Nigeria, I saw it as a bit of freedom. I don't have that disciplinarian on my case all the time. Do you kind of get what I mean? So yeah, so as freedom, I got in trouble at school a few times because my mom was the opposite to my dad. So if my dad is quite, heavy on discipline and being very strict, you know. My mom was the opposite. She was a lot of love and patience, though she was strict and showed discipline at times as well. But it was rare. I must have probably done something to cause her to get angry, and even sometimes she would even apologize afterward. So yeah, that period when I was in Nigeria, away from my dad, I felt freedom. So coming here as well is like the same sort of thing. Although I'm now in a new environment, so I'm also trying to find my feet as well. You know, not I don't really have to learn a new language because Nigeria was I'm sorry, English is my first language in Nigeria, though I could speak Yoruba as well. I could understand it. So I didn't have to learn a new language, but I had to kind of like pick up a new accent, because
Right.
being young as well, it's like that was one of the things you could say I got bullied for when I was, younger. Because when I came here, I was in year three. I think I'd started year four in Nigeria, but then when I came here, I had to go back to year three. Something like that. I can't remember exactly the details, but something like that. Um, yeah, so I had to like kind of like, yeah. Um, learn to fit in and adapt. And, because I wanted obviously people to like me, I was seeking love, which I didn't quite get from my dad. At least it felt like I didn't get from my dad, As, I learned later on in life that, you could say discipline without love is like abuse. At least that's how it comes across. And then love without discipline is like enablement. So for my dad, it's like I got that discipline without the love. So because I didn't get it from him, it's like I'm looking for it elsewhere. So I wanted to fit in a lot. So yeah, so in school you could say that's where I tried to, I cared about making friends and fitting in, but when I first came here, I didn't fit in. I struggled to fit in. I was that different kid, especially when we first lived in Essex, where I think the only African or black kid in the school. Was it in the
Wow.
school? In I think yeah, it was in the school. If I include my brother, we were the only two, something like that, right, in the whole school. So yeah, I was so different. You know what I'm saying? Not only do I look different, I sound different. I've come from a different background. So it was
Wow.
a stark contrast for me. And so yeah, and I started to deal with that as well, whilst also not having my dad, constantly around too. So yeah, it was quite an interesting environment, you could
Yeah.
say.
Tell me about the
Yeah.
bullying. Like, how bad was it like for you?
Do you know what? Yeah, I think. I don't I don't remember it too vividly now because obviously I've guess I've grown a lot, forgiven and stuff like that. But if I can remember some things, it was like, yeah, people obviously make fun of my skin color and stuff like that. The fact that I was different, I looked different. Some people didn't really want to be my friend at that time as well, So most of the times you can say I'll be alone, even though I wanted to make friends, but I'll be alone. I remember one time quite vividly, where we were playing, well, the year sixes were playing football. I was in year three, so I was much younger than them. And I think they kicked their ball off the pitch and I went to get it for them. And then one of the year sixes just came and like, I can't remember what they said or did exactly, but it was like, it could say threatening, tried to threaten me, as a year three. And so that was kind of like my experience. And yeah, so that was in that school. But the bullying actually continued because I changed schools quite a few times. So if you bear in mind, I went to two schools in Nigeria already, right?
Wow.
So one was like a public Christian school, the other was like a private school. Then I came here, went to that school in Essex, right, which was like an all-white school. I was like the only black, kid in the school. Well, if I exclude my brother, but if I include him, we're like the only two, if I remember correctly. Then I moved when we moved to Dartford. I went to a Church of England school, right?
Wow.
And yeah, and the bullying continued.
Wow.
Um, Even though this time that you can say more people of ethnicity or there's more ethnic variety in that school. There were a few more Africans and black people, mixed race kids and stuff like that, or one or two. So, but yeah, the bullying continued. But this time, it was more about like the bullying was for my accent and for my name as well, because I have two names, a middle name. Well, I have my first name, middle name, last name, right? But when I say two names, I excluded the last name. So my current middle name, which was my first name then, was a very Yoruba name. Although both names are Yoruba, but it was very Yoruba name and it was a difficult name to pronounce. And so that was the name in the register. So I got every time the teacher would try to say my name and things like that, you know. Yeah, the kids would start laughing and stuff like that. Or if the teacher left the room for a few moments, they'll go look in the register and try, make fun of it and pronounce my name and stuff like that. So I got bullied for my name and the way I spoke as well, which is one of the reasons which kind of like forced me to try and pick up the accent very quickly. Do you get what I'm saying? And even this continued even to secondary school to the point where though I've picked up the accent a lot, right? There was still, some words maybe I would pronounce with the Nigerian way of pronouncing it because that's what I've heard a lot growing up and stuff like that. So I even still, and this was even now, it continued even with African kids, you know what I'm saying? But African kids that were born here, like Nigerian kids that were born here, who didn't have the Nigerian accent, but because they didn't, they could tell that my accent wasn't authentically British because they could tell that I had a Nigerian accent in the past. So some of the words I would say and things like that, would be with the African accent. And, so that even continued, which was crazy. So bullying was something that actually followed me throughout childhood, even up to my, secondary school days, my teenage years. Yeah,
So,
in
okay,
various,
so you're going through all this bullying. Did you have a
yeah.
space when you would go home and actually sort of like speak to your parents about it, or just that's not happening?
Not quite, not quite. So if I now backtrack to, back when I was in year three, or when I moved to the Church of England school, right? Because after that school, I went to another school, which was a
Mm,
more public school. Um, yeah, when I was there, I think I did, tell my dad, once or something like that, right? Because now we're living together.
ah,
Because yeah, so when we first came here in 2006, for a few months, he lived with a family in London, whilst we lived with the other family in Essex, right? But then I think a few months later, we all moved in together with my mom's siblings.
right,
So like in 2007, we're now in Dartford with my mom's sibling. But then just a few months later, again, we also now moved into our own place, which we were renting at the time. So I think end of 2007, yeah, is when we moved into that place. So now me and my dad, we're all in the same house now. So now I'm in the Church of England school, and I think I remember I had that incident where I was bullied to the point where I was crying, and I went home and told my dad and whatnot. And my dad taught me, which was good at the time, but at the same time, it was confusing for me which was this because my dad probably he did his best, I guess, in advising me, but didn't explain it the best as well in the ways that I would have understood at that age. But it was like if anyone does anything to you, even if they hit your fight, you do not fight them back, do not hit them back, right? Which is good teaching, like Jesus said, if they slap you on one cheek, turn the other, right? For them, which I think is was his intent, it was what he was trying to communicate. But as a child that young, I didn't quite understand that or get that. He didn't quite explain to me why that is. Do you get what I'm saying? So now I
Mm.
just feel like defenseless. And on top of that, he would add a layer of fear to it. Say, if I do fight in school, maybe even if it's to defend myself, that I would even get in trouble at home too. So he's like, now I'm even scared now.
Yeah, so
If I'm
isolating.
yeah, do you get what I'm saying? So now when the bullying continues, it's like I feel even defenseless. Like there are times where I want to fight back, but when I'm scared, I might get so angry that I might even hurt the person severely. But on the other hand, as well, I'm also scared I'll get in trouble at home too. Do you get what I'm saying? And then also that eventually also led to me not sharing much with my parents also because I didn't feel like they would understand because they had that African, you could say, mentality. So I didn't have that space to share with my parents at home. I didn't feel like I had anyone in school to share with. So I actually grew up with a lot of, you could say, um, resentment, and not learning how to process my feelings. Something that is even, it continued even into adulthood, which made it difficult for me to process my feelings, which was, we'll get into it at some point, but which led me
So,
to other ways of
so
trying to process.
your resentment was towards your dad for not, or what was it?
It was towards you could say everyone. I think first and foremost to God, because it's like first I was like, God, like why would you give me such parents, who are so strict and so this and so that they don't get it, so I'm angry, like God, you don't love me. Like why did you, if you really love me, you wouldn't have given me such parents sort of thing. So first it's like resentment towards God, then it's resentment towards my parents, or first to my parents and then to God, whichever way you want to look at it. And then also to like the kids who are bullying me too as well and feeling like I can't do anything about it. So it was a difficult time, but thankfully I did have a best friend at the time who, interestingly, is now a pastor of his church. But yeah, so we were quite close. He got me to, football and stuff like that. Though I didn't really share much with him, but at least that kind of like at that age got me to take my mind off some of the things. It was like an escape for me, and you see that pattern continue throughout my life or my childhood where it's like I go through so much hardship and I look for escapes. I want to just get away, from what's going on in my life. Yeah,
Wow.
so yeah, it's intense.
Gosh. So you met you so this friend of yours that you just said here is how did you guys link? How did you guys meet up? What was this in high school, obviously?
No, so this was still in primary school, still in that
Hmm.
Church of England school. So his parents were pastors already, who my parents knew back in Nigeria. So when we came here, we discovered that, oh wait, we're classmates.
Oh,
Me
wow.
and their son were classmates and stuff like that. And they lived not too far from us. So I probably went to visit his house maybe once or twice. But most of the time we were together in school. Right. So he was probably my first close friend that I had in this country.
Mm.
I've had quite a few since, you know. So yeah, but he was my first close friend in this country to the point where even he got me to support in the same football team he supported at the time and things like that.
I'm not even going to ask what team it is. I just what team is it?
It was Man United. It was Man United. Obviously, now I don't support them. I don't support any football team, but yeah, it was Man United at the time.
You know
Even though,
what? You're a
yeah.
wise man.
Oh, you supported them too?
No.
Oh, oh.
No way.
Oh, you mean I'm a wise man for not supporting them anymore? Yeah, yeah, I had to get away from that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So, okay. So you clung
Yeah,
on to this friend of yours, I can imagine, because obviously
yeah,
everywhere else was so feeling so unsafe. So,
yeah.
did you go into high school with the same friend or?
No, so because I had to eventually leave that particular school because interestingly, so because I was struggling with a lot of these emotions, not knowing how to deal with it and process it properly. I ended up getting in trouble a lot as well.
Mm.
It's well, but it's weird though, because on one hand, there was part of me like where it's like it's actually me causing the trouble to come to me in a sense. Like, just being disruptive in class, trying to be that class clown to get people to laugh at me and whatnot. But on the other hand, my dad saw it as persecution in the sense of like it's a lot of it is like unfair, unjust, you know what I'm saying? It's like I was targeted by the teachers too, which prompted my dad to actually take me away from that school at the beginning of year five. So I stayed
Mm,
in that school year three and four, like because I joined about halfway through year three, and I left at the beginning of year five. So I went to a new school which was a state school, wasn't Church of England. Um,
yeah.
this is one of the reasons why my dad wanted to get my younger brothers, because now my youngest brother was born at this point now, because he was born literally a year after we came to this country. But yeah, so he wanted them to go to a Catholic school because he felt like, it would be a better environment for them and stuff like that. Whereas I still went to this public school. So I joined that public school in year five. So I had to again make new friends. But interestingly, one of the kids who bullied me in that old school, in the Church of England school, I met him in this new school too.
Oh
'Cause
wow.
it's interesting because just before I left that old school, him and I had an altercation where um, I can't remember what it is that happened, but I just remember we're on the school field and he started chasing me around. He was quite fast, I was fast too. So we're both athletic, but I think I was faster than him. So he kept on chasing me around. He couldn't catch me, so he got frustrated. It was even so bad like the whole school, like that was on the field, was watching and cheering me on. You know what I'm saying? So he got frustrated that he couldn't catch me. Then he ended up climbing the fence of the school fence to the other side to the park. And I think that got him expelled from the school. So he
Wow.
moved schools. And it turned out that my new school was actually the school he moved to. So,
Goodness
so
me.
the rivalry just continued,
Really?
there.
Even in that school?
Yeah, even in that school, but it was one of those ones where I wasn't the one looking for the trouble. He just was envious towards me, He didn't like me. He later explained or he shared like out of frustration that he felt like I took his friends because even in the new school, he had already made friends with some of the guys. And when I joined, because I'm that new kid, I'm different and whatnot, people took interest in me. So which was also ironically different to my previous experiences when I'm the new kid. It's more like he's new, leave him, forget him. But this time it's like people are actually taking interest in me. I want to be my friend. They see me as this cool guy. He's very athletic. Is this, is that. To the point maybe they somewhat idolize me, you could say. Interestingly, I'm still close with those people, with
Wow.
those guys. I believe that God is trying to use me as a light, as a witness to them now.
Wow.
But yeah, so they took me in, and so he was a bit envious of that. He felt like I've come and taken his friends, so that rivalry just continued. The bullying continued, even to the point where there was a time in year six, because I was in that school year five and six, where he punched me in the nose. And again, it was because I've remembered what my dad taught me about not fighting. I wanted to fight back, but I was like, I held back for two reasons. One, I didn't want to get so angry that I beat him to the point of no return, or also I had to get in trouble from home. So what I did now was that I grabbed his head, held him in a headlock to just, prevent him from, doing further damage, right? But he bit me really hard in my chest area, really hard. I had bite marks there, and then after that, it caused me to let go, right? And then that's when he punched me in the nose. I had a nosebleed. I started crying and everything, and then he got into more trouble as a result. But I got into trouble too. The fact, obviously, that I held him in a headlock. Yeah. So it was
It's like a
crazy.
lose-lose.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It literally was. And yeah, so that was the experience with him. Interestingly, this rivalry sort of continued in secondary school, but we didn't go to the same secondary school. So he went to a different secondary school. I went to a grammar school. And again, so it's like now I'm again exposed to new people again. So from both my primary schools, probably only one. So my first primary school, I remember only one person went to that same secondary school as me, which was also one of the kids who bullied me in that first primary school, in the Church of England school. It's crazy how they followed me up. But you know what? Now I have a lot more perspective because now knowing scripture, I see that, God prepares his people even before they even know him. For example, God prepared Paul for his ministry even before Paul knew, like followed Christ. You get what I'm saying? So now I see all of this, persecution and tribulation as it was all preparation for what was to come, for the type of ministry I believe God has called me to.
Wow.
I see we have 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna, but yeah,
So
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 yeah,
so in that 5 minutes then, could you Aki, just there are kids out there who might
yeah,
listen to this and like what you said, that confusion sometimes of just love and confusing the love and confusing the strictness and just thinking, God, what's going on here? I'm getting bullied at school. I'm struggling here. How would you speak to a kid like that? Do you know what I'm saying? Who was in the same position as you? Because there's a lot of frustration in a lot of kids sometimes. They're struggling with that love. And sometimes you grow up with African parents and sort of like it's just done. They do it overboard sometimes when it comes to sort of like the discipline with no love, like what you say.
Yeah.
And sometimes it confuses children. And then you go to school now, you're facing all these things and struggling. What would you say to a kid who's going through the exact same thing that you went through when you were in school?
A very good question. Do you know what? Because by the grace of God, God has placed me in such a position to actually help these children. Why? Because I'm actually a
Mm,
football coach. So I coach children from the age of 2 to up to 14. So I actually have
mm,
experience dealing with some of these children, right? And one, I'm being a light to these children. I'm being a witness of Christ, right? I'm reflecting Christ's love for them, you know. But at the same time as well, I'm also, there to also help them to grow, to give them wisdom, to instill in them also discipline and showing them love and to help them develop their character. So I've actually come across some of these kids, right? So there's two things which I've learned growing up since coming to Christ, which are the best ways to deal with these things. One is to share your emotions, to pour it out, right? Share it with not just anyone, because not everyone has your best interest, you know. So share it with someone who you trust, whom you love, and whom you know loves you as well and has your best interest. So who isn't going to encourage you to do what is bad, but who's actually going to listen to you and just listen, but also share wisdom with you, you know. Because what we don't want is for it to be built up. Because what I use an analogy, right, of a bottle. So I tell the kids, imagine you're this bottle, right? And the water is your feelings and is your emotions. Every time someone hurts you, you get filled up with water. But what happens if you keep getting filled up with water? The bottle eventually explodes. It pours out. So you may have that period where you appear to be calm, but you're just building up. You're just building up to the point where you've reached your breaking point and you just explode out of nowhere and then you probably end up getting in trouble and it works out worse for you. So what happens is each time you get hurt or and you're filled with your emotions, what do? Pour it back out again. So that way the bottle stays in a good state and it never explodes. Do you get what I'm
I
saying?
love it.
So
I love it.
how do you pour it out? There's two ways you pour it out. One is by sharing with someone who you trust, who you know has your best interest at heart, who loves you. And the other is also by crying. So interestingly, crying is something that we're actually, especially as boys or men, we're told not to do. It's like men don't cry, you shouldn't cry. But no, crying is actually good. Because even I think scientifically they say crying releases stress hormones, right? And we know in scripture that Jesus wept. This is the Son of God, God Himself, He wept. Do you get what I'm saying? Because crying it is a good way of releasing what you're feeling and it keeps you soft as well. No one after just crying is now going to go and start fighting other people. Do you get what I'm saying, right? So crying keeps you soft, is vulnerable, and a lot of the times we want to avoid that vulnerability, but it's a really good way of releasing what is really on our heart and what we're
Mm,
feeling. And I think those two ways are the best ways to release what we're feeling because every other way is destructive. It's either we get into like fighting people, watching pornography, again, addicted to video games, getting into drugs. Every other way is either destructive to ourselves or to others. But these two ways are the only ways that it's not destructive to anyone. And it helps us to release. Because we're human beings, we have emotions and we need to pour it out, right? Because we're not supposed to harbor it in. You know what I'm saying? But we need to pour it out the right way, not the harmful way. So that's literally what I teach these children. So yeah, so that's
wow.
the answer.
Wow. I love it. I love it. I love it. I really like that advice as well. It's something that's not really taught, especially with boys, men, do you know what I mean? Kind of thing. It's something that we struggle with. So I love that. And on that note, we're going to pause and go straight into part two. Okay.
Sure. Sure.
All right.